Um, Andrew Martinez,
Here.
Linda Stedman,
Here.
Karen De Silva,
Here.
Shantia Underhagen,
Here.
and I'm here, Richard Youngkin, the vice chair, acting as chair. We also have Brian Wagner from the planning department. Is there anyone
Here.
else here from the planning department?
No.
Okay. So we'll move ahead with our meeting.
All right, I have our applicant in the waiting area, and I know that the application is probably down as new business and a little later, but we should probably go ahead and bump him up on the agenda so we can deal with that and let him leave.
Then we want to have the approval of the minutes after we do the application?
No, you can approve the minutes first, but before we get on to any other matters.
Okay, why don't we have approval of the minutes? Does anybody have any, you've all read the minutes, does anybody have any corrections to add or items to discuss? I have just two minor ones. If anybody else is okay with that. Under 6B, new business, this is just very minor, but in the fourth sentence down, it talks about that I think Andrew actually noted that the comprehensive plan frequently references the town's historic mill structures. And then in parentheses, it says, which do not fall within any historic district. Actually, I think probably we could amend that to say they fall within the National Register districts. I think you were referring to the National Register districts, perhaps, not the local zoning district.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct, Andrew?
Yes.
So, and then the second one would be that I noted the town's historic research survey book. It's the, it's really, we can give the exact title of that, but it's really the town's historic resources survey, which is an inventory of all the historic properties in the town. So those are very minor. And with that, those corrections, I'd like a motion to approve.
Rich, would it
Second.
make sense to clarify further that it's the state office book you're talking about, correct?
Yeah, it could be the, we could just abbreviate it, the RIHPHC.
I think that would be good.
Yeah. It's their book.
Okay, I can make those adjustments.
Very good. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of the November 5th meeting
I'll second.
As amended, correct?
as amended correctly.
And
We have
I'll
a
second.
second from Karen De Silva. Let's just go around quickly. Shantia,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Andrew,
Approve, aye.
Karen,
Aye.
and myself, Richard, yes, all approved. So why don't we go then quickly to the application for a certificate. of
Okay.
appropriateness.
I'm gonna promote Mr. Montero, who's here on behalf of the applicant. Mike, you need to unmute yourself. If you move your cursor down to the lower left-hand corner, you should see the microphone. You got it.
Got
I
it.
think he's got it. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
What we're going to do is go into your application right now, and I'm just going to read into the record what it is and a little bit of notes, and then you can present on that. The property address is 2590 Kingstown Road in Kingston, plat 23-3, lot 28. It's known as the Kingston Inn. And it was built in 1756, 57. And the applicant is before us, I guess. Mike, you're representing the owners of the building. You're the management consultant for the
Yes, sir.
building. And just a few notes about the building itself. It was built in 1757, but there were modifications made in 1910, 1911, as a lot of the properties in Kingston had these upgrades, colonial revival updates. And there's quite a description of it in the Historic Resources Survey book on page 50. So we have also, I think, heard from you in the past. Maybe Mike presented, maybe somebody else, but you've been restoring the windows, haven't you, on the building?
We had, the last thing that we had to do was there was a screen door
Yeah,
that had to be put on. There were
Yep.
actually two of them.
I think everything has been fairly successful, and this application is really to replace aluminum storm windows that are failing. So with that just preamble, the floor is yours, Mike.
Well, that's pretty much, you said it in a nutshell. The existing storm windows are old, and they become a hazard in some sense with the tabs at the bottom to operate. So the owner was looking to replace the existing windows, a storm window, with in-kind product.
So let's see if there are any questions from the board here. Do we have any? Should we go around the table? Shantia, do you have any questions?
I just wanted to confirm that you're planning on replacing all of the existing storm windows?
So what they're planning to do, or the proposal is to replace the storm windows that I'm sure that you may or may not be aware that some of the windows are what we call false windows. So there was a remodel done years ago, well before me. So some of the windows they're not accessible from the inside. So the only windows, is 46 in the building that are owner operated or tenant operated. So those are the ones that we're looking to replace.
And do the other ones have storm windows now on them just for appearance sake?
Yes,
So how many of those are there?
there are a total of 110 windows on the building. And there's 46 that are operational from the inside.
Okay, thank you.
Karen, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Andrew?
Just to be clear, these are exterior storm windows and the interior windows will remain the same in place?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
The-
that is my question.
Are you set then, Andrew? Any more questions?
I'm
Linda?
set.
No, no questions.
No questions? I just have a couple questions. The type you're specifying are the superior storm window? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So we have a picture of. So it would be the replacement of 47. These are triple track aluminum storm windows that are on the building currently with 47 of the superior storm window triple tracks.
Correct.
And that the windows that are non-operable would be the so-called unaccessible windows would be left with their current storm sash intact, because those haven't deteriorated at all.
Right.
And the profile of the storm window seems to be similar or in kind to what you already have. Is that correct, Mike?
Correct.
Okay. So I think the record's pretty clear. I wanted to say that the standard that we're operating under, the guideline, is on page 17 of our standards and guidelines handbook. And I'm just going to read it for the record. It's number 37. If storm windows are used, they should not obscure original window proportions. Wooden storm windows hung on the exterior are preferred. Triple track wood or aluminum storm windows are usually acceptable because they provide adequate insulation, help owners retain original window sash and casings, which is exactly what's happening here, and are easily reversible. They can be removed easily and changed out. And that's what Mike is proposing. New replacement storm windows may be added to the interior or the exterior to provide weatherproofing and insulation matching the obtained by double glazing or insulated window units. So I think that we're well within our standard. It's replacement in kind. And I think that the only other question is, will these be painted white to match, or will they come in white from Superior? Are they going to have a, not that we care about the color as much as we just care about everything matching, and that they might have a coating other than raw aluminum?
It's white.
It's
The
white.
same.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think with that, we have enough information to move forward, if nobody objects, with a motion to grant a certificate of appropriateness. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Anyone?
Shanti,
Moved by
so moved.
Shanti Underhagen,
Second, a second.
second by Andrew Martinez. We'll have a vote then. We'll go around. Shanti Underhagen,
I approve.
Karen De Silva,
Aye.
Andrew Martinez,
Aye.
Linda Stedman.
Approve.
You approve.
I approve.
And, okay, and Richard Youngkin, yes, I approve. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you. Thank everyone for
Yes.
taking the time to meet.
It's great. Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
How many units are in that building? Can you tell us that?
There's 26 units
Wow,
altogether.
wow. And they're all sort of apartments.
Correct. Correct.
Well, you're keeping the building going. That's good.
Yeah, I'm actually the outgoing manager. There's a new manager that took over this month, actually.
Ah, are you training him?
Yeah, there's a transition, but
Good,
he'll do a good job.
good. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
All right.
And, thank you for your work on that building.
Yes, sir. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey,
Have a good
Thank you.
holiday.
Good night.
You too.
So the next item on the agenda has to do with our discussion about the proposed cottage zoning. And we have sort of probably a lot of things to ask and questions, and we're mindful of Karen, who has to, what did you say you had to leave, Karen? 10 minutes?
6:30. I have a call at 6:30 with,
6:30. Oh, well, then maybe we have time. I think perhaps I can just give a little preamble, and then we'll turn it over to Brian to give us more information. By chance, I came across this on the planning board's agenda in November. And so I wanted to, learn more about it and reflect on it in terms of the Kingston Historic District. And so we managed to get it on the agenda for this month. We had room for it so that you all could also consider it and ask questions of Brian and sort on ideas and whatnot. It will apply to the Kingston Historic District. It's a zone that will allow for so-called cottage small units to be built on various density, depending upon the size of the lot involved. And I guess the questions are really directed toward how will it interact with us as a Historic District Commission, and how will our standards and guidelines work with what the Planning Department and the Planning Board have put forward. Now, right now, it's sort of in a spot where it's about ready to go to the Town Council for approval, but it hasn't been approved yet by the Town Council. So it's not effectively in place yet, but it's on a pathway for that approval. So with that, Brian, maybe you can just give us a little bit more background on it. And then I know that I put some questions forward for everybody. Hopefully you all got a chance to look at those questions. They were part of the materials that were posted with the agenda. Did you all get a chance to look at that? Good. So I think Brian could go through those a little bit with us. That would be helpful to start the discussion.
Sure.
And then we'll have questions from all of you individually.
All right, so just for a little bit of background on this, this is part of an effort initiated by the Town Council a couple of years ago, using monies within the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's about $100,000 contract with planner in Providence, Horsley, and Witten that's looking at different aspects to create affordable housing options throughout the town of South Kingstown, in order for the town to find different ways to meet its 10% state requirement for low and moderate housing. The first products that have been produced as part of this effort included some revisions to the town's inclusionary zoning ordinance to try and make that a little bit more tempting to developers and to try and create a little bit more affordable housing. Some modifications to its regulations involving accessory dwelling units so that maybe we could encourage people to create, say, over the garage type apartments that would be rentable on an affordable basis. And the third prong was this cottage ordinance, which is a way to allow increased density of development on a single lot, very small houses, limited to about 1,000-foot, 900 to 1,000-foot footprint with basically a story and a half of space. And in general, they're built around around and fronting on a community space, community gardens, paths, and whatnot. The details are laid out in the ordinance. We already have one proposal for this sort of development. It actually predates the efforts at the ordinance. Somebody came in with a project on Columbia Street that they're looking to build a project like this. And it seemed to be interesting for the rest of the town. So it allows this form of development. There's no limitations on where it can go, although it is really sort of focused on locations with the infrastructure to deal with it. It's not going to be particularly amenable to unsewered areas or whatnot because of the densities involved. although in theory, you could still do some sort of community septic system with a development like this. As I tried to explain in my discussions with Richard, this has gone through the planning department. It has been up there. It has been approved, but for some technical revisions that the planning director is still working on finalizing, and then it will go to the town council for adoption as part of the zoning ordinance. Richard contacted me, or actually he broached his concerns during the planning board work session where we were discussing sort of the final tweaks to this. I tried to respond to the questions that he posted the best that I could so that we would all have the benefit of starting from that as a background. This does not in any way undercut the Historic District Commission's regulatory jurisdiction. Its standards and guidelines would still apply. I would venture to guess that there are going to be places in the historic district where this type of development from the get-go just will not meet your standards for this sort of development. There are, however, some larger lots within the district that I guess could potentially be used for this. And the question would be the interaction of the cottage ordinance and the historic district ordinance. I guess in theory, I don't know. And it would be a sort of a case-by-case discussion to have. I don't know whether from a historic perspective, this is just a non-starter in a historic district like the Kingston district. I don't know if the two ideas can be dovetailed together. Could you come up with a historic district with high density that meets architectural and design standards that would satisfy your guidelines? Certainly we had in history high density districts. It was a lot more common when people didn't have cars to take them every place they wanted to be. So I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I did talk with Jamie Rabbit about this. I guess if there is a substantial objection from the Historic District Commission that there is absolutely no idea that this works in the historic district from a conceptual level, that you could raise that at the town council meeting and ask that the historic district, the overlay district, be exempted from this. So that is basically where it is. As I laid out in my responses to Richard, this does not impact your jurisdiction. A cottage development project, just like any other development project, is gonna have to be done within your standards if it's going to happen in the historic district.
Can
Yeah.
we ask questions, Rich, or do you want to?
No, go ahead. I'm starting to be repetitive, so go ahead.
No,
Brian's
no.
done a good job. Why don't we have some questions? Shanti? Yeah,
So, thanks, Brian. That's helpful. I mean, I read through all of this, looked at it pretty carefully, and I don't know how other people feel, but I certainly don't think that it's a non-starter in the historic district. That's my opinion. Others may disagree. But I could see this as an interesting opportunity for certain parcels, perhaps. I guess what a couple things concern me. One is if in fact the historic, I'm trying to remember where I read it. I read it somewhere, and it may have been in your answers. Yes, it was in Rich's question number 10. What is the review process? I think it would be very helpful to everyone involved, including applicants, to have the process be clear that the way I read your answer to number 10, unless I'm misunderstanding something, applicants would have to get Historic District Commission approval first. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, the way the major land development works is that when we get it in the door for the master plan review, the plan goes out to all of the various boards and commissions in town. It goes to Conservation Commission, it goes to the police department, the fire department, for everybody to comment on the conceptual level of the program. So you get that review, and getting in early, especially in this case, I think is really important, because if the Historic District Commission has major qualms about a proposal and its ability to meet your standards in terms of design, or maybe it's simply not appropriate for a particular lot. I mean, this is really a lot by lot question in something like the historic district. That they need to know that in advance, because
Right.
Master plan is very conceptual. All the money gets invested at the next stage at preliminary plan, because that's when they start investing money in engineering design and utility design and drainage calculations and all of that stuff. So if they know at the outset that on top of all of that work, they're going to have to engage in some expensive work in terms of aesthetics to fit in, or a more expensive layout in order to make it acceptable from the street perspective, they may decide to cut their losses and go. So I think it is important that you guys have input up front.
So that's helpful. I had one other question. I have a number of questions, but the next one, and then I'll let others speak, goes to Rich's question number 5 about the jurisdiction over building placement on a lot. And I think your answer is clear about the building placement, but I delve into this question of the zoning, no front facades facing a public way requirement a little bit, and say that's really about design. And it makes me question or want more comfort that the Historic District Commission will, in its review of this type of project, if it happens in the district, that the commission will be able to tweak design to fit the character of the surrounding area, and not be constrained so specifically by what this cottage zoning might require in a completely different area.
I agree. I think that that's going to be important. And in fact, I think in order for the historic district and the cottage zoning concept to play well together, I think there's going to have to be a willingness for some waivers on the cottage zoning side, because some of the things that are being proposed, at least in the SketchUps for aesthetics, are different. I'm not saying that they couldn't be substituted with something else that more historically characteristic to the district. And there may be other things like you may need to have, maybe the front two cottages do need to front onto the public way in order to create an appropriate historic district perspective. And the planning board could grant waivers for something like that if necessary to make it work.
So I guess one thing that occurs to me, and then I'll shut up and let others jump in because I'm sure people have a lot of ideas and questions. I mean, it does occur to me then that, or to ask whether the ordinance could in fact have a statement along those lines or some acknowledgement of there being certain within, if a proposal is within the local historic district, a local historic district, and let's just say we only have Kingston now, but maybe we'll have more down the road, that there will, that there are going to be special considerations or something, some language that alerts people to there being some distinction in those areas.
Well, I think what's going to happen is, excuse me, if you come across one of these projects, you would review it under your guidelines, and if you couldn't approve it, you couldn't approve it. You would deny the certificate of appropriateness. But if you could approve it, given certain conditions, you can issue a conditional approval, a conditional certificate of appropriateness saying, we approve this provided that the planning board allows X, Y, and Z in order to meet standards number such and such and such and such from our guidelines.
Okay.
And I think that's the way to approach it. That way it goes back to the planning board, letting them know that there is a conflict somewhere between your guidelines and the cottage zoning ordinance. And if need be, they could require a joint meeting with you. They could ask you to sit in on a meeting and advise them. Or they could simply grant waivers that address the conditions that you're requiring.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Why don't we move on? Or anybody else have any questions? Linda, do you have any questions?
I don't think so, not at this time.
How about you, Andrew? You're on mute, Andrew. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Or talk really, really loud.
Yeah. No questions. Would there be an instance where we as a commission would make recommendations that the planning board would overlook or not approve of our what if we, is there an
Yes,
instance where we'd be in conflict with the planning board, for instance?
Well, I think that's what I mean by a conditional approval. You would grant your certificate of appropriateness with conditions, meaning if the planning board did not accept those conditions, your approval would not be final and it would be considered a denial. And it would have all of the impact of any other denial. The development wouldn't go forward. The applicant would be left with his rights of appeal from your decision to the zoning board of review and then on to the Superior Court.
How about Karen? Do you have any comments on this?
And I think the only comments I have are, I think, echoing some of Shantia's comments, and it's about the building design standards. And each village, and when I think of beyond the Kingston district, and I think of all the other villages and where there are access to sewers and, where this could be feasible, I think about the character of many of these areas, and they all have a look and feel. So where I live, near the hospital, it's a blend of old as well as, you know, the 1960 or 70 ranch. And it kind of works. But if we start, if we start to allow a dilution of that, those effects start to go. So kind of playing off of what Shanti is saying is when you kind of go to these, it's kind of that clause that's missing for me, is that these communities, I would hope that they would kind of blend in, right? At least those that are street facing, that they're blending in with the environment that they're around, so that we're not diluting the look and feel of where the town is today. And so that's what's absent for me, and that would be something that I'd like to see in these guidelines. I think they're just high level enough, but once that first project comes forward, I think we're going to start to see that, you know, many of these things we'll be like, oh, but.
Can I jump in and say, Karen, I completely agree. And a note I had made on the draft ordinance under the first section, purpose, was under number 5, which says ensure compatibility with neighboring uses. And the comment that I wrote next to it is, shouldn't it be more than uses? And is this where the question of character could be inserted? Because it's not only compatibility with use, is it? I mean, isn't it also compatibility with other elements that make an area, as Karen said, feel the way it feels and looks the way it looks?
I'm not going to disagree with you there. I think you know, throughout town, a developer's objective should be, you know, not to drop a gingerbread Victorian type cottage development in the middle of a mid-century modern neighborhood. And I would hope that nobody would decide to do that. And I would also hope that the planning board would comment on that. You know, they have installed, you know, architectural design standards. Those are there to ensure that there is some sort of architectural aesthetic and that we don't just wind up with really densely packed neighborhoods of little boxes with no aesthetic to them at all. And we all know developers who would do that to turn a buck.
Yeah, and I think we're all familiar with what was being proposed with the Larchwood, right? And so there's another piece of property where, you know, that would have access to all the criteria, right? To say, oh, that's a great piece of property. And then for it not to fit, right? I mean, that's just the gateway. That's what I kept hearing. It's a great use of term. It's the gateway to Wakefield. So that would be my only comment.
I think I'd like to add that to Karen's, that and I know we're talking about stuff that's outside of the Kingston Historic District, but we can convey it back into the Kingston District as well, because the contextual elements of the Kingston District that we all know pretty well, big houses facing Kingstown Road, the small outbuildings behind, may provide a context to allow some of this cottage development if it takes on a different appearance than I think what's been proposed in the ordinance, or what's proposed actually in the given out to us in terms of examples. So it's kind of looking at the ordinance to see how we could, with our standards and guidelines, modify the end result. And certainly in terms of everywhere else in town that we have a listed district, like the Wakefield district where the Larchwood property is located, or Peacedale, which has some more extensive residential districts that are in the Peacedale district, National Register district, the planning board would seek our counsel or our advice on how to proceed with layouts, as they have they have actually asked us in the past to comment. They just recently asked us to comment on the proposal for the Sturgis House, off of the special management district. So I'm hoping that that continues. I'm hoping that there is that consultation, but I'm also hoping that we can somehow come to grips with how we could have some affordable, I mean, Kingston already has a lot of affordable housing, but how we could be in a position to say, yes, we can accommodate these cottage type things in Kingston and have them fit in. I think, unfortunately, in my own mind, after all the experience I've had, 40 years in historic preservation planning, and I staffed my first historic district commission in like 1978 in Saratoga Springs, or 9, I can't even remember when it was, so long ago, that it's a slippery slope. We I think need to have a better foothold in the ordinance to be able to say, we need to provide that approval before master plan or at master plan approval. And it has to be binding. It can't be sort of in this wishy-washy place where the planning board could disagree with us. And then what do we do? So I'm a little concerned about that. The other concern I have is about tear downs. I'm very, very much concerned about the economic dynamics of this in Kingston and how our major buildings that front Kingstown Road, some of which are not in great shape, could be jeopardized. And we have to remember that in our guideline on demolition, which is, I'll find it here in a minute. It's, I think 75. In the demolition section, it actually mimics the state enabling law. So it's not far from what the state enabling law actually tells us about projects that have a compelling public purpose. And affordable housing, I think, has been pretty clearly stated in the comp plan and in this new ordinance and in town dialogue, that it is a compelling public purpose now. There's a state law that tells us that we must try to achieve this 10% affordable housing goal. And so I'm a little concerned that our guideline 75 says that we will allow demolitions of historic properties if there is a compelling community purpose. So I'm concerned that a developer could say, right, I'm going to build affordable housing. We desperately need this. This old house is falling down. I'm going to demo it. And that will allow him to continue. What I'd love to see is, could we not use the existing houses as part of the formula? Couldn't we say, let's say it's a half-acre lot and it would yield 7 units because of that density ratio of 1 acre to 15 units. If we have a existing house with 3 units in it, could they not be part of the calculation? And therefore we could create sort of more of a renewal kind of perspective rather than a demo perspective, more of a rehab perspective than a demo perspective.
I understand your concern, especially the way affordable housing works in Rhode Island. They really bow to the creation of affordable housing over zoning and a lot of other requirements in order to make it happen.
Right.
I'm not sure that the creation of this cottage community really changes anything, because that threat already exists from other forms of affordable housing development. If somebody wanted to tear down a house and build an apartment structure and dedicate 25% of it to affordable uses, then they would be able to push it through town process just like any other affordable housing development. I would hope that the State Housing Appeals Board would give special consideration to such a demolition project, because history, once it's gone, it's gone, and you don't bring it back all that easily. So
Brian, are you talking about the comprehensive permit kind of application that would
yeah,
have a demo in it?
yeah,
Well, I think it's a little different when we have a town ordinance that, anyway, it would be a kind of a way to, if we had, let's say we did develop our own standard and guideline that said, as part of the affordable house, the cottage zoning thing, to allow it to occur, we would like to see an existing dwelling be part of the project, and that we would entertain cottages, quote unquote, behind that dwelling that would really be more like outbuildings. That actually is already in our guidelines, that land development or flexible type project should follow a pattern like that, that we use the context of what's there and flex whatever we have to flex to allow that to happen. What if we actually told, let's just run the scenario through and see what you think. What if we got a cottage proposal that was following sort of the standard kind of footprint that's outlined in the cottage zoning amendment, and we said to them as the board, no, we really can't approve that because it doesn't fit into our standards and guidelines, but we would encourage you to do this other thing that is written up in our standards and guidelines. And then they went about producing that for the master plan. It would be so different from what was expected for the planning board. What do you think would happen? Do you think if we approve that kind of thing at master plan level, the planning board would look at it and agree?
yeah, because
Do you have any confidence that that would happen?
yeah, I do, because I think the planning board is going to be looking for ways to allow the development to occur in accordance with the applicable regulations. And that means all applicable regulations, not just the cottage zoning ordinance. And you have to be willing to make some accommodations in a situation like that, where the project has, two very different masters it has to please. I do think the planning board would be willing to make some accommodations. For example, you leave the historic house up front and put your cottage quote outbuildings in the back. I think that's kind of a neat, interesting concept. So yeah, you grant waivers to a couple of the requirements regarding facing a public street and maybe the layout of driveways and stuff like that in order to allow it to happen. And that's why I say that's where the idea of conditional certificates of appropriateness come in. It would be the Historic District Commission's way of saying, this will work under our standards of guidelines if you do X, Y, and Z.
Right. So I think where we're headed maybe is sort of some way to modify this, because we should have more discussion. But one of the things that occurs to me is that we don't want to be historic preservation people who are not conscious about affordable housing. We don't want to go down, in my opinion, a pathway that says, no, we can't do this because we're trying to be historic. I think that's sort of not really fits in, right? Am I right with this? That it sounds like it's not a good place to be, to say, no, because we're historic, we can't have this.
Right.
And
Let me point something else out that might be of particular interest to you. That one of the next portions of this affordable housing project is what's referred to as missing middle housing, which is much more typical of what we've seen done in historic neighborhoods, where they take big old buildings and subdivide them into apartments and condo living units. So a house with 4 or 5 dwelling units, depending on the size of the structure. And you can maintain controls over something like that on how it appears from the street. And it may be something that allows the creation of affordable housing in a historic district much better and much easier than the cottage zoning component.
right,
So
right,
you may see developers lean towards that once we get that in place.
right. That's been done in other communities in Rhode Island. It's the typical example is Newport with the mansion condo conversions. I mean, so many of them were done. A lot of them were done with tax credits too, which was great. Federal tax credits. So where should we go with this, Brian? What do you think we should do?
And I'm going to drop you guys.
All right.
Okay.
Good night, Karen.
Good
Thank
night,
you very
Karen.
much.
Karen.
Thank you very
Good
much.
holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Okay, you too.
So,
I think it's difficult to go down the slippery slope of trying to create an ordinance that addresses a whole bunch of individual community interests. I think the Historic District Commission is well situated, in fact, much better situated than a lot of other groups to be able to tweak these designs in a way that works for them, or even, like I said, out and out deny it if it's a bad lot, if it's a bad project that just won't work within the legitimate constraints of your guidelines. That's why in my responses here, if it sounds like I'm saying we don't need to change the cottage zoning ordinance, it's because I don't believe we need to change it, because I think the two processes will work together. And I think that trying to tweak the cottage ordinance to address the historic perspective is going to create more problems than it solves. And in fact, I would prefer to see, for the limited purposes of the Kingston Historic District, I think the option would be to simply exempt the district from the cottage community
Just exactly.
concept.
Yeah. Well, I guess there are two options then. One is, or more, one is to have us get serious about developing our own standards and guidelines for cottage zoning, how we would approve such a project and work on it within the district, the confines of what we have in the district, looking at it very carefully. There may be some properties in the district that you could actually go with just the way it's written by the planning board. There may be other properties where it wouldn't be effective at all. It wouldn't work at all unless you changed it completely and had a different set of standards and guidelines. And then I think we need to be very careful about that denial thing. What happens when we deny a project? We can only deny a project if it does not meet our standards and guidelines. We cannot go down our rabbit hole, which is denying a project without that background, without that reference point. Otherwise, our denial can be thrown out. It needs to be based upon objective standards and guidelines that we have. And the other part of the equation is I don't want to get into any conflicts with any other boards and commissions in the town about an approval. That can be a real, I think, a bit of a landmine situation with the developer bouncing us. It's what I call a ping pong match
Yeah.
between one board and the other board. And the developer throws up his hands and says, I can't get anywhere with this. I'm going to court.
Right, right,
Just
right.
nobody can approve this project. And then we also have, in my experience, and Brian, you may not know about this, but when we in the past have had a setback requirement, a dimensional regulation that didn't quite fit, we did ask the applicant to go to the zoning board for relief. And they did do that. They got relief from the zoning board. But I don't know what would happen if, in fact, the applicant didn't get relief from the zoning board. Because basically those underlying dimensional regulations, the setback requirements, the height requirements, all of that governs us. We can't really set a new set of dimensional regulations under the base code. So, I mean, that's been my experience for many, many years. I've checked with attorneys that I've worked with on this, and they have agreed with me. The HDCs in Rhode Island under the enabling law are bound to look at exterior appearance of the buildings. They cannot set new dimensional regulations. So I have a real concern about whether we could indeed do something like this unless it was specifically said in the ordinance itself, in other words, legislated by the town to give us a little bit of a foothold that in Kingston, the Historic District Commissions, they govern, what they put together in terms of their guidelines and standards governs the dimensional requirements that are in this, because actually what you've done is, what this thing is, it's a new overlay district. The cottage thing is another overlay district. So you actually have two competing
Right.
overlay districts that in some circumstances, a developer would say they're competing, and I can't deal, you know what I mean? I can't design this thing because I'm dealing with two competing situations. So I think this alternative would be for the board to consider as we go through the town council process, having one of us designated to appear before the town council and describe our concerns, and to have the town work it out, whichever way they want to do it, but at least have the communication made so that it's clear what the concerns are.
Well, two points. One, I think you just completely explained why I think it's unlikely that a developer is going to go down this rabbit hole in the historic district. Not to say that it's impossible. I've seen some strange things happen, but coming into it, a developer is going to realize that he is proposing a project that on its face may not fit in the historical context of the district, and he's going to have to do extra work, meaning extra expense, in order to get the project through. So I think that sort of mediates against seeing this kind of project in the district. However, the Historic District Commission and I had to go look at it. You are, completely free to amend your guidelines as you see fit.
Right.
And staff will assist you with that to come up with something that accomplishes your goals without creating undue friction within other parts of the zoning ordinance, such as the cottage zoning ordinance.
Well, what's the pleasure of the board? What would we like to do here? Should we start with Shanti? Or should we start with Linda?
Please start with Linda.
Go ahead, Linda.
I'm trying to work everything around in my head here.
It's very difficult
I'm
to
tr-
do without having a
It is.
proposal to look at.
Yeah, it
I-
is. It is.
I'm seeing the Kingston, and I think that it's a good idea. I certainly wouldn't want to discourage affordable housing anywhere.
Right.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how this would look in Kingston. I think that's, it's a point that I really, whether you could get it past the other houses in the backs where you wouldn't see them, I think that would work possibly. But I certainly wouldn't want to see houses demolished to put this concept to work. And I hate to say it, but there's ways around everything.
Yeah. Right.
That's my concern. But I think Richard, you brought up some good points. I don't know if changing the ordinance, I'm not sure exactly which way to go on this. I can see loopholes everywhere. I've seen them in the past.
Yes.
No matter which way you go, there's a loophole.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to wordsmith and legislate this, but I would like that our commission's concerns and criteria are the overriding decision in what gets built there. Not that we're out and out against and saying no to this kind of development, but our concerns are the utmost our criteria are the utmost deciding factor on what ends up being built in the end. I would like, so.
Yeah, you would like that to be clear. I think
I agree.
that's where I am.
Yeah.
And Shanti agrees with that.
Yeah, I think that would go a long way. Even that simple clarification under process somewhere in the document would give a better level of comfort. I certainly would not want the result of this conversation to be that the district is exempted. I just think that sends a bad message all around. I
agree.
think it's what we are fighting against in our field of historic preservation is an elitist, not in our backyard sort of approach. And I think all of us recognize there could be ways that this could happen successfully.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. I agree with that too. We actually have an affordable housing district. We are actually doing that in Kingston.
Yeah.
And it could be these buildings may be preserved because they are apartments, that they're being used that way. I mean, the Kingston Inn,
Right.
I don't think that would exist if it wasn't student housing, right? It
Right.
wouldn't exist. It would have to be a commercial enterprise as a hotel, a boutique hotel or something. But it's
I'd
not-
venture to say that half the houses between Lower College Road and North Road are
Yeah,
multi-units. At least I would venture it's half, if not more.
right.
Now,
So-
we do have at least one attendee. If that person wants to chime in and make any comment, they can raise a hand. But if not, you're perfectly entitled to just sit and observe. So I'll throw that option out there. So everybody can continue. Oh, ask and you shall receive. So let me see if I'm going to invite our. Here we go.
Susan's muted. There you go.
There we go. Hi,
Hello.
Susan.
Hi, everybody.
Hello,
Um,
Susan.
Hi.
Thank you for including me. My name is Susan Axelrod, and I'm the president of the Kingston Improvement Association. And I'm really happy you guys are having this conversation tonight about the issue of cottage zoning in Kingston. I'm very intrigued by Richard's, I think it was Richard who proposed, the idea of maybe preserving some of these old houses by using the space behind them to fill in a little affordable housing. And I have the impression from our town manager that we're not, South Kingston isn't tolerating affordable housing, they're encouraging affordable housing. And I wonder if the ordinance should be amended to show that actually that potentially could be a desirable effort made by builders in this town to maybe consider historic properties that have space next to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And whether or
Right.
not we should actually, instead of just sort of leaving that as something we'll tolerate if it happens, maybe do we want to consider putting it out there as something we would almost, maybe as a suggestion, almost encourage that would be a good use of some of the space we have in our town.
Well, I think that would be actually, if you made it, it didn't matter if it was Kingston Historic District, could be any of the National Register districts or any historic house that's listed, that is an option to keep the house from being demoed, to clear the land for, a cottage development, that the house should be included in the design. Why not?
Right.
I think you could probably come up with some really interesting house, carriage barn, back shed, back wing kind of scenario that works and it keeps one of the things that the affordable housing problem is that we have a lot of actual affordable housing in some of our historic districts, houses that are not really all that expensive to buy, and to demo them and build more affordable housing on that land seems to be like, well, you're taking one down to build 6, or why not keep the one and build 5, or keep the one and build 4 and have 2 units in the one that you were going to tear down. It's just in today's world of trying to be sustainable, trying to be not moving all this building material to the landfill, trying to be conscientious about energy and recycling. Why are we doing anything that would encourage demo? That's sort of my concern.
Well, I agree, Richard, but also for example, I'm thinking about the Elisha Reynolds Potter House here in Kingston that has, it's sort of barn space is an apartment.
Yeah.
And then they have that other weird sort of building back there that's also potentially an apartment. And you
Right.
wouldn't know about it from the road. It doesn't affect, it doesn't affect any of the sight lines. It's just small apartments out back that you wouldn't even know about unless you knew about. You know what I'm saying?
Right, absolutely. And you
Um,
could get that courtyard open space effect happening too. They wouldn't be sort of like the model in East Greenwich in the cottage, but it could be around a courtyard. It could be a setting that would go with the historical setting of the house. So you could accomplish some of the design elements, the size, but I think you'd have to think about barns and reusing barns, and they're much bigger than 900 square feet, but you could have maybe 2 or 3 units in it, and they would be 900 square feet.
And now we're getting into the like I said, the next component of our exercise, which is the missing middle, which is the bigger structures broken down into smaller dwelling units. So, this may be a very pertinent discussion to have as part of that process.
Well, in that case, we would wait until that comes along and maybe take a pause on cottage. I mean, we have such a small district that one mistake is going to be like in our faces big time. And I don't want to go down that road either. I mean, all we need is one demolition or one large project behind something that doesn't make sense. And we're going to have really serious problems with our community, the constituency that we have, that we're trying so hard to be good with and to understand what their sensitivities are. This little Kingston community.
Yeah, and just to be fair, those threats already exist from other potential development projects, at least with the cottage community proposal as it exists. There has been a conscientious effort to build in aesthetic design as part of the process. And in this case, I would argue that aesthetic design could and should take on the character of the historic district through the commission insisting on the project meeting its design guidelines.
Well, all right. So I think we want to take some action here. At least I think it's appropriate to I think we should embark upon, because I think this is a moving train. I think you either get on the train or it's going to leave the station without you. That we can offer up suggestions to the town council. We can embark also at the same time, simultaneously, on developing a little bit more our own standards and guidelines to accommodate this kind of development. I don't think we have clear, I'm looking at mine over here on the side. I don't think we have clear enough or enough. I think we want to fine tune what we have. I guess that's where I'm going. We have some direction, but I think it needs to be fine tuned. And certainly with regard to keeping existing buildings in the mix. And that's what we would encourage. The developer would have, then he'd hear what we have to say. We would give some direction on an approval. Then he'd have to go to the planning board and get waivers of their regulations. Of the
Richard, excuse me, are
Well, I
you
think you'd have to
suggesting that
go
we
to the
revise
planning
our
board.
guidelines? The existing guidelines or amend them? What are you suggesting?
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
suggesting that we will have to fine tune them. They'll have to be amended. They're not
And-
absolutely clear. They
Is
are
that-
clear, but they're not as clear as they could be.
Right, and is that something that we can, of our own volition, decide to do? And what's the process for doing that?
The process that was, the process we had to actually do what we've done with our existing ones, which were written a number of years ago. In that case, they were devised, they were written, they were discussed by the board as a group. Case examples were given. There's a lot of educational material handed out so people understood what was going on. And then they were approved and adopted by the board. These guidelines are our guidelines. They're
Yeah.
sort of like the subdivision regulations in which the town planning board has the right and is designated the authority to devise its own land development regulations. The enabling law for historic zoning directs us to have standards and guidelines, to adopt them, to become our standards.
Yeah.
And guidelines. They don't need to be approved by anybody else but us.
Okay, well then that seems to me to be a nice path forward.
Yeah.
I mean, not an
And-
easy one, because it's always challenging to,
But I think it would, as the guidelines now read, they're meant to give us real solid direction on how to approve a project. So this would be similar to that. We would take the guidelines for new construction and site planning
yeah,
and rehab. And I think we'd have a separate section that would be right just for this cottage
Yeah.
zoning. Because I
Yeah.
think as in other projects, we want the developer to go directly to find it right away, not
yes,
be
yeah,
confused by anything else, so that he knows exactly upfront. And if we follow Brian's suggestions, his direction, what will happen is that the developer will come to the planning department first. Brian hopefully will be involved in this and give him if it's in the Kingston district, he'll give him what our guidelines are. And if Brian is, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I get the sense that what you will see happen is the developer will say, oh my goodness, they want all this stuff and I'm going to have to abide by it. It doesn't really match completely. It's sort of in flavor of what the planning board's amendment is, but it's not completely the same. I'm going to have to get waivers. I may have to get them from the planning board. I may actually have to go on and get them from the zoning board of review, because it's a zoning ordinance that, he's seeking deviation from.
And, the way this typically works, because this is treated as a major land development project, those all come in for what's called pre-application review. Before the technical review and before the planning board, which is even more conceptual than conceptual master plan. It's basically, there's no public hearing associated with it. It is a very informal discussion with the board about, okay, here's my idea. Do you think it works? Do you see anything I clearly need to reconsider or adjust before I start pushing forward on that? If something were to come in for a pre-application meeting on a cottage community located in the Kingston Historic District, I'm sure it would come to me as the staff member working with the board here. And I would recommend that they set up a similar pre-application review with this board to get your input on the concept from a historic. And that puts you on track to work with the planning board that much earlier in the process to try and come up with a project that meets everybody's concerns.
So
Early intervention is key.
So you can see how the system could work for us. And then we would, we'd have to take the risk. I think that maybe if we want to, we can start on that right away. I think we can begin. I don't know how we would communicate to everybody in time of Zoom, but maybe we could begin to draft the change. They're not really changes. What they are, because I don't want to say that we'd have to change our guidelines. It's really tuning them a little bit more, because they already give us the direction under I think I cited it 59 through 61, and then there's another one which is specific 52, which has to do with land development and flexible. So if you read it carefully, it's all there, but I think we just need to highlight it a little bit more so that it's clear. It's, it's easier to explain. So I think we could do that. We could start that process right now and get comfortable. I'd like Brian to actually double check on this kind of process. Maybe you'll have to talk to Amy Goins, the legal counsel, or run it through whoever you feel is
What process specifically are you referring to?
the one that you've laid out, that it could actually work, that it would be understandable by the other boards, by the planning board, that we would have this last say basically in Kingston Historic District, as Andrew has wanted to have, and Shanti, I think we all of the board members now participating are on that page, that we have to have the assurance that we will have the last say in whether a project is approved or not approved. And that we will be able to say, you're going to have to meet our guidelines, period. And you'll have to get waivers if you want to proceed with, and see, the problem is that they have to actually get all those waivers to perhaps comply with our guidelines. That's the problem. But if that will work.
Well, I mean,
No.
I actually sent an email to Amy this afternoon, trying to get some additional information pertaining to this discussion. She did not have the opportunity to get back to me, but hopefully when she does, we'll be able to discuss this further. As I said in answering your questions, your jurisdiction, your ability to deny a certificate of appropriateness does not change. You have a degree of autonomy separate and apart from the planning board to be able to say, look, this project does not meet our design guidelines. We are not going to issue a certificate of appropriateness for this project. Now, if you're going to take that stand, it's incumbent on you to be diligent in identifying the particular standards that you are relying on that are not being met, and to lay them out in a written decision in a manner that hopefully prevents it from being overturned on appeal. You can't just say, I don't like the project, denied, because it'll go to the zoning board. And if not at the zoning board, it'll go to the Superior Court and get overturned. And then you'll get stuck with a project you really don't like.
Yeah, we just want to know specifically from the legal counsel, if we have those in place and they're specific and we follow them, will it hold against that zoning amendment? If it has different dimensional regulations, different parking, different roof, different pitch, different, I mean, probably won't mess with the size, but you know, there are a lot of waivers. What I'm trying to say is it will require a lot of waivers from what is in the cottage amendment to be approvable in our district. And I think you have the basic.
And I will say, as I said before, I don't see a problem, because I know that in the development of the cottage zoning regulations, the intent was not to create a specific aesthetic that was binding and unchangeable for these developments. The intent was to ensure that there was some kind of architectural aesthetic and not just little squat ugly boxes packed really close together on a property.
Mhm.
So whether that aesthetic is historic colonial or mid-century modern or Victorian, I don't think it really matters. it needs to be interesting in design.
Can I chime in with a
Susan, did you
question?
have something? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Richard. So at the last planning board meeting, when this was discussed, there were specific conversations about things like roof height and roof pitch, what building materials could be used. So I think there must, sorry, Brian, am I mistaken that there are some design guidelines that are sort of built into this ordinance that it's multiple different shapes of roofs and windows and porch dimensions? Like, aren't there some things in there that might not be consistent with every neighborhood style? And then I wonder if then the ordinance needs to be changed to just add a line saying, or other such style as is consistent or with character with a neighborhood where this development is being built.
I think we need to be careful with vague language like that because ultimately it'll be exploited by somebody looking to do something, cheap and poorly thought out. I think having what we have now, which is an express set of standards, which the planning board could change through a waiver process, is better. We can't come up with a set of regulations that anticipate every potential neighborhood character out there. It would be completely unwieldy. So I think what we have now is an express set of design standards. And, the planning board would be free to grant waivers from that if something more appropriate to a neighborhood were to come along.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we have to move on because we're running out of time. So what's the pleasure of the board? What would you like to do with this? Continue it to another session, write a memo to the council? I suggested that we could begin our own standards and guidelines refinement. Anybody got any direction that we can give here? Shanti, you're muted if you're talking.
My thought would be somehow to memorialize our conversation so others know that this is what we care about. It sounds like it's moving now beyond planning and to the town council. But I certainly wouldn't want, again, I'm sensitive to the perception that preservation is an impediment, and so I think the idea of working on tweaks to our existing design guidelines to accommodate this new vision makes sense. And maybe that's what we communicate, is that this is, we do have concerns, but we our first attempt will be to address them in our guidelines.
Okay, that's excellent. How about Andrew? You think, and we could express maybe to the council your concern about that final, who has the final say?
Yeah.
Mhm.
These are being done in anticipation that we will have the final say.
Right.
You're good with that. And Linda?
I agree that we should attempt to revise our standards and that we have the final say
Okay.
in the decision.
So why don't we'll draft then a letter to communicate this. I don't think we can do that tonight as a board. And Brian, do you have a sense of what the timing is? When will the council get this?
I don't know. The COVID thing has made workflow very, very strange. And I don't have the day-to-day contact with the rest of our staff that would allow me to know where all this stuff is at any particular time. I can talk to Jamie tomorrow. My sense was that he was trying to get this wrapped up sometime this month, and at least in a format that it's ready to go to council. I'm not sure that I would expect to see it on a council agenda before January.
Yeah, right. That would make a lot of sense to me, that they wouldn't have time to look at it between now and Christmas, certainly.
No, I mean, let's face it. We have another week of real work time before,
Right.
all of the holidays muck everything up. So
I could take on the responsibility of drafting a letter with Brian, and we could get that ready in a draft form for the board to look at in January at our next meeting. If we could set up a meeting in January, hopefully, and get it out to you in advance. Does that sound okay, Brian? If we proceeded down that road, logistically?
yeah, that's fine. I think that we should have a motion authorizing the acting chair to draft a letter, and a quick list of bullet points that should be covered in the letter. And I think that would be more than adequate.
Yeah, terrific. And then that letter will come back to the board for approval before it goes anywhere to the town council.
We can do that. The point of having an actual motion and a vote, although let me just check. I don't think I actually had this on the agenda for any kind of vote. I think I just had it on for discussion.
Right.
So yeah, we really shouldn't be voting on this tonight. So if you want, we'll work on drafting a letter, and we would have to schedule another meeting to vote on it in early January.
Correct. So I think we'll just leave it. I think that's a good base, and we'll just leave it at that. We'll get our thoughts wrapped around this a little bit more. Think about, please, as a board, review those items in the guidelines in our handbook, and also look at the ordinance again, so that when we come back with this letter, we can really tweak it up to say exactly what we want to say to the town council.
Well, Rich, I think it also gives us a little bit of breathing room to look at the current guidelines, which I know you have been instrumental in. I'd like to take a look at them, and I think we all need to have a comfort level that we can tweak them to the point of a comfort level with this type of project. Let's make sure we can do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can, but you all please do that homework. That's really important. So you can see and try to visualize what this project, what it could be, what you could do to bring in that affordable housing along the lines of the cottage, but with guidelines that fit our current guidelines, and go on from there a little bit. So I think we should get back quickly to the agenda and just wrap things up. You'll bear with me. We may be able to just go through this very quickly, Brian. The next thing is on the comp plan, or on your planning activities. I'm not sure we need that. Do we need that? Can we skip over that?
Yeah.
Or is it something that you really want to report?
No, I don't. That's sort of a stock line item on the agendas, just in case something has come up that we need to discuss. I don't think at this point that there's anything to add.
All right, and the next item is our next meeting date. Well, we have a meeting date in February that's scheduled, but I think what we'll do is we'll try to find one in January, if it's okay. Brian and I will discuss that, but it would be good if we had one to follow up on what we just discussed. I want to get in front of the schedule rather than trying to play catch up with the
Reactive,
council schedule.
Yeah.
So are there any other items of old business or new business we about ready to wrap things up. Everybody okay? You okay, Linda?
Yep, I'm fine.
Getting hungry here.
Not yet.
Thank you
I
very
am.
much. Thank you very much, Brian, for all the work you've done on this.
Yeah, thank you,
Not a
Brian.
problem.
You're encouraged.
I understand the concern.
Yeah, very good. And,
Good.
feel free to talk to Jamie about all of this too. We're going to share all of it. And any more concerns before we adjourn? Anything else?
No.
All set?
Thank you, Rich.
Oh, you're very
We have
welcome.
a motion
you.
to adjourn?
Let's have a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Okay.
Seconded by Andrew.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
And I hope you all have
Aye.
a Merry Christmas now. Try to
Thank you.
relax.
Thank you, Rich.
Also.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Everybody
the
stay
holidays.
safe. It's we're not out of the woods yet on this, and it's very difficult at holiday time. I know. So
It is. It is.
Yeah.
We're kind of used to it, but still, it's
Thank
crazy.
you all for letting me participate.
Oh, Susan,
thank you for
so
coming,
much.
Susan.
So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. All
Good
right,
night.
guys, time to say
Bye, all.
goodbye.
Okay.
Good
Cheerio.
night.
Bye.